My name is Faye Marseille and I'm 42 years old. For the last 4 years I have believed that my family betrayed me for money. I have spent countless nights replaying the lie they spread about me, cataloguing the ways they abandoned me, and accepting that I would never get an explanation, much less an apology. I built a life without them. I became a surgeon. I became someone. But last month everything inverted. I found out the truth and it was somehow worse and better than I'd ever imagined. They weren't trying to steal from me. They were trying to erase me completely. My mother stopped answering my calls on a Tuesday in March. My father blocked my number on a Wednesday. My sister, the sister I'd shared everything with for 38 years, told me not to contact them again. 1 week after my residency graduation, the people who raised me decided I no longer existed. If you're reading this and you know what it's like to be suddenly excommunicated by the people you built your identity around, I need you to know something before we go any further. What I'm about to tell you took me 4 years to fully understand. It's not a story with a tidy resolution or a moment where everything clicks into place and everyone hugs it out. But it's true, every word, and I think maybe you need to hear it. I was invisible before I was hated. I need you to understand this distinction because it matters. Being invisible is something you can live with if you're patient. You wake up, you do your work, you watch the spotlight hit people around you and you tell yourself it's fine. You're fine, you're building something. Somewhere along the way, being unseen starts to feel like a choice, a noble one even, like you're above the performance, above needing validation. That's the lie invisible people tell themselves. I was the youngest of 3. I have an older brother, Marcus, 7 years older, and a sister, Riley, who was 5 years ahead of me. My family lived in Portland, Oregon, in a Tudor-style home on Millennial Parkway that my mother loved with an intensity that bordered on religious. She'd talk about the house's bones, its character, the way the morning light hit the south-facing windows. The house was an extension of her identity. We were furniture in it. My father was a commercial real estate developer. He was good at what he did, excellent actually, which meant he was always closing a deal, always in a meeting, always just about to arrive home, and then not arriving. He had a way of being physically present while being entirely absent. He'd sit at the dinner table and read the financial section of the paper while my mother talked. He'd nod at exactly the moments where agreement was socially necessary, but his eyes never left the page. I learned early that if you couldn't hold his attention with money or accomplishment, you couldn't hold it at all. My mother was an interior designer, or rather she had been before motherhood was refigured as her primary career. She'd left a small but successful firm when Marcus was born, a decision she mentioned at least once a month for the rest of her life. Not bitterly exactly, more like a fact she was reminding everyone of, including herself. The implication was clear. She had sacrificed something of value for us. We owed her the courtesy of being worth the sacrifice. Marcus was the golden child before I understood what golden children were. He was handsome in the way that made people stop talking mid-sentence when he entered a room. He was athletic. He was charming. He got into Stanford, not because he was brilliant, though he was smart enough, but because he was the kind of person Stanford wanted to be associated with. He had an ease about him, a naturalness. People wanted to give him things. Riley came next. If Marcus was the golden child, Riley was the beloved one. She was pretty but not intimidatingly so. She was smart but not threateningly so. She had this quality of likability that felt almost mechanical in its effectiveness. Teachers loved her. Parents of other children loved her. My mother loved her most, though she would never have admitted that in words. I don't remember when I became the invisible one. It wasn't a moment. It was a cumulative erosion, like watching your fingerprints fade from a piece of glass. The science fair when I was 9, I'd built a solar oven out of a pizza box and aluminum foil. I had researched solar panels for weeks. I'd practiced my presentation. I stood at my display table for 2 hours while no one from my family came. My mother had a migraine. My father had a work emergency. Marcus was at a soccer tournament. Riley was, I don't remember, it doesn't matter. What mattered was that I stood there, 11 years old, watching other kids' parents take pictures and ask excited questions, and realizing that my family's absence meant something. It wasn't just that they were busy. It meant they had chosen to be elsewhere. My recital when I was 12, I was learning cello. I was actually quite good. My instructor said I had an ear for it, which felt like the first sincere compliment I'd ever received from an adult. The recital was on a Tuesday night. My mother came because she felt obligated, and she spent the entire 20 minutes I was on stage checking her phone. I watched her do it. I saw the blue light illuminate her face. I hit a note so beautiful it surprised me, and I looked at her to see if she'd noticed. She was texting. My father didn't come at all. He'd forgotten it was that night. The scholarship when I was 15, I received a merit scholarship to summer science camp, a selective program that only took 40 students from the entire state of Oregon. This was the kind of thing that should have mattered in my family. Marcus had gotten academic recognition, Riley had been crowned debate champion, and I'd done something concrete, something that meant a school had literally chosen me. I brought the letter home, a formal acceptance from the University of Oregon with my name printed on it. My father read it while eating dinner, set it down and said, "That's nice, you'll have to work hard." Then he asked Marcus about his investment club. The letter wasn't framed. It wasn't mentioned again. But here's the thing about being invisible. You start to believe that the problem is you. You tell yourself that if you just achieve enough, accomplish enough, become enough, then they'll see you. Then they'll love you. Not the way they love Marcus's effortless charm or Riley's uncomplicated likability, but in some way. In any way. So I became the one who tried. I got straight A's, not because I was necessarily smarter than my siblings. Marcus was actually academically gifted, but because I was willing to sacrifice everything for that A. I studied while they socialized. I did extra credit while they went to parties. I volunteered at the hospital when I was 14, partly because I was interested in medicine, but mostly because I thought it would impress my father. He was impressed by people who worked hard. Work was the only language he spoke fluently. I made myself into someone who could not be dismissed on the grounds of not trying. But you know what I learned? You can't earn your way into someone's heart if they're not looking at you in the first place. My mother had a photograph on her desk at home. It was the three of them, Marcus, Riley and her, taken at Marcus's Stanford graduation. They were all smiling, arms around each other, golden sunlight catching their hair. I had been in the background of that photo. I was cut out of it. My mother had literally cropped me out and kept the frame. I didn't mention it to anyone. Riley and I were close in a way that siblings often are when one of them is trying desperately to matter. I confided in her. I told her my fears, my dreams, my anger at how invisible I felt. I thought this bond meant something. I thought it meant she saw me, even if no one else did. She did see me. She just stored everything I told her like ammunition, waiting for the moment when she might need it. Medical school was my lifeline. Not because I particularly wanted to save lives or because I'd been struck by some noble calling, though I would learn to love those parts of it, but because it was the only thing that made sense to me. It was the one achievement that my father couldn't minimize, the one accomplishment that had genuine weight in his world. I was accepted to Johns Hopkins when I was 22 years old. Not early admission, not from the waiting list, but a legitimate acceptance with a full scholarship. My father cried. Actual tears, the first time I'd ever seen him cry. He hugged me in the kitchen of that house on Millennial Parkway and he said, "I knew you had it in you. I always knew." He didn't know, he'd never paid enough attention to know, but in that moment I didn't care. In that moment, I was finally enough. Medical school was brutal in ways I hadn't anticipated. The first 2 years were a grinding memorization of every bone, every muscle, every drug interaction that existed in human knowledge. I worked constantly. I barely slept. I went through the entire experience in a kind of trance, surviving on coffee and the belief that this suffering was worth it because it meant I was building something real. By the 3rd year, clinical rotations, something shifted. I stopped trying to prove something and started actually caring. I rotated through surgery and found myself falling in love with the precision of it, the way a surgeon could see a problem with absolute clarity and address it directly. There was no ambiguity in surgery. The answer was either working or it wasn't. The patient was either stable or they weren't. It was the first environment I'd ever been in where the truth was visible and undeniable. I decided to pursue surgery, and I called my father to tell him. I remember standing in the hallway of Johns Hopkins Hospital. It was July, sweltering hot, and I was still wearing my white coat because I'd been on call for 22 hours, and calling him. "Surgery," I said. "I'm specializing in surgery." There was a pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end. "Faye, he stopped. "That's really impressive, pediatric surgery." "General surgery for now," I said, "possibly trauma." "Even better. You know, I was talking to Robert Chen at the country club, and his daughter just matched into general surgery at Mayo. It's incredibly competitive." I waited for him to acknowledge that I was the one who had done this, not some random woman at his country club. He never did. But he'd said really impressive, that was something. I finished medical school and matched into a prestigious residency program in California. Johns Hopkins had wanted me to stay, but I'd chosen UC San Francisco instead, partly because it was the better program, partly because I was desperate to be somewhere my family couldn't access me with their presence. I don't think I understood that about myself at the time, but I understand it now. I was already preparing for something, already bracing for impact. The residency was the most intense experience of my life. Surgery residency is designed to break you and rebuild you in the image of your specialty. You work 80-hour weeks. You hold people's lives in your hands while you're so exhausted you can't remember if you've eaten. You make mistakes that haunt you. You also save people's lives, and that part is extraordinary. I thrived in it. I was good at it. The attending surgeons started requesting me for their cases by my second year. I published research. I was offered opportunities that residents typically had to wait years for. I was becoming the kind of surgeon that my father, might finally be proud of. During my 4th year of residency, I had a moment that I thought would change my relationship with my family forever. I was the primary surgeon on a case, a 53-year-old man with metastatic pancreatic cancer. It was a Whipple procedure and it was complex. My attending was present, but the bulk of the surgery was mine. I took out the tumor. I preserved the blood vessels. I reconstructed the anatomy. It took 8 hours, but when it was done, I knew I'd done it well. 3 days later, the patient was extubated. 3 weeks later, he was discharged. 3 months later, his wife sent me a photo of him at his daughter's wedding. That was the moment when medicine stopped being about proving something to my father and started being about something real. I called my family to tell them I'd completed my residency and matched into a fellowship in trauma surgery at UCSF. This was a significant achievement. Trauma surgery is where you go if you want to be the best. It's the hardest specialty, the most demanding, the most competitive. That's wonderful, Faye, my mother said, and I heard genuine warmth in her voice. It was the voice she used when she was proud. I'd heard it when Marcus got his MBA from Stanford, when Riley published an article in a major law journal. For the first time, it was directed at me. I was 29 years old. I had waited my entire life to hear my mother say she was proud of me, and now, finally, she was. I remember standing in my apartment in Oakland with the phone pressed to my ear, and tears started rolling down my face. Not from sadness, from relief, like I'd finally arrived somewhere I'd been trying to reach my entire life. We should celebrate, my mother was saying. Your father wants to fly out for your graduation. We'll make it special, all of us, the whole family. Really, I said. Of course, really, you're a doctor, Faye, a trauma surgeon. You've done something extraordinary. That was March. My graduation was scheduled for May. My family was coming. Finally, I thought, finally. I need to back up and tell you about something else that happened, because this is where it gets complicated, and where I need you to understand what Riley had been doing. During my fellowship applications, I had confided in Riley about something that wasn't anyone's business, but was consuming my thoughts. There was another resident in my program. His name was David Schultz. He was brilliant, possibly more brilliant than me, though we were competitive about it in a way that was mostly playful. He was also kind in a way that most of us had forgotten how to be. Residency eats kindness out of you usually, but David had held on to his somehow. We'd started sleeping together in the middle of my 4th year. It was casual at first, 2 exhausted people finding comfort in the dark, but somewhere around month 3, I realized I was in love with him. I told Riley this. I remember calling her from a call room at the hospital, 2 a.m., exhausted out of my mind, and just pouring my heart out. He's beautiful and he's smart, and he makes me feel like I'm not crazy for doing this, I told her. Are you sleeping with him? She asked. Yes. Does anyone at the hospital know? No, we're being careful. Be more careful, Riley said. People at teaching hospitals will eat alive anything with even a hint of scandal. Don't let anyone know about this until you've matched into your fellowship and he's matched into his. She was right, of course. Medicine has weird hierarchical dynamics, and a relationship between 2 residents in the same program can get complicated, especially if anyone's competitive. So we kept it quiet. Just us, 2 people in love in the margins of a hospital where we were both just trying to survive. David matched into a trauma surgery fellowship at Johns Hopkins. I matched into UCSF. We'd had a conversation about long distance. We'd decided it was worth it. We were planning to move in together within 2 years, once we'd both completed our fellowships. I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy for the first time since my father had cried at my medical school acceptance. I told Riley about the long-distance plan. I told her how much I loved David. I told her that I thought he was the person I wanted to marry. She congratulated me. She said she was happy for me. She seemed genuine. I was feeding her ammunition, and I didn't even know it. 3 weeks before my graduation, I got a call from the program director. "Faye, I need you to come to my office." My stomach dropped. That's not a conversation that ever goes well. When I arrived, the director was sitting behind his desk with a very specific expression on his face. Disappointed, stern, like he was about to address a child who'd done something he couldn't believe he needed to explain. "We've received some serious concerns about your conduct," he said. My heart started hammering. "There's been an allegation that you received special treatment during your residency in exchange for sexual favors, that you slept with a patient, that you've been using your position to get better assignments." I stared at him. I couldn't speak. I literally could not form words. "Obviously, these are very serious allegations," he continued. "I want to hear your response." "That's not true," I said. My voice sounded very far away. "None of that is true. I don't know where this is coming from." The allegation came from a fellow resident. They requested anonymity, but they provided detailed information. I was cycling through who it could have been. David? No, absolutely not, but who else knew? Who else would make up something this damaging? "I want to know the specific allegations," I said. "Verbatim, what exactly did this person claim?" The director hesitated. "They said you've been having a sexual relationship with an attending surgeon in exchange for preferential case assignments. That this attending surgeon has been giving you high acuity cases and taking you off undesirable rotations. They also alleged that you received your trauma surgery fellowship because of this relationship, not on merit." That was when the ground shifted completely. Nobody at the hospital knew about David and me. We'd been careful, so either someone had figured it out and was weaponizing it, or this was about something else entirely. "I need to know who made this allegation," I said. "I can't tell you that." "Why not?" "Protection for the reporting party. Faye, this is a serious matter. We're obligated to investigate." "This is a lie," I said. "Someone is lying about me." "Can you prove that?" "How do you prove a negative? How do you prove that something didn't happen? You can't. You can only prove that it did, and someone was doing an excellent job of making it look like it did." "I have email documentation of my assignments," I said. "I have case logs, I have my performance reviews." "We'll look at all of that," the director said. "In the meantime, I'm placing you on administrative leave. You're not to come into the hospital. You're not to contact other residents. You're not to discuss this with anyone." I was 29 years old, 5 weeks from graduation, 30 days from celebrating with my family who had finally been proud of me. And I was suddenly a pariah. I didn't tell my family immediately. I know that's going to sound crazy, and maybe it was, but I couldn't. I couldn't watch the pride drain from my mother's face. I couldn't hear my father tell me I'd thrown away an opportunity. I couldn't bear it. Instead, I did what I did when things were difficult. I worked. I gathered every document I could. I pulled my performance reviews, all outstanding, dating back to my first year. I collected emails from attending surgeons complimenting my work. I made lists of surgeries, of cases I'd assisted on and cases I'd led. I documented everything systematically, the way you would in the OR, with precision and care and the faith that if you just lined up enough evidence, the truth would win. I hired a lawyer. She was a woman named Sandra Chen who specialized in medical misconduct cases, and she charged me $10,000 to tell me what I already knew. This was a he said she said situation with a lot of institutional risk on my side. "The allegation is that a superior gave you preferential treatment," Sandra explained. "Proving it false is harder than it sounds. You need the attending surgeon to come forward. You need other residents to verify that the case assignments were fair and random. You need to demonstrate that your fellowship was earned." "I can do all of that," I said. You can present evidence of it. That's different than proving it. And right now, the hospital is going to be very cautious because if they're wrong, they're liable for suppressing a sexual harassment complaint. So they have incentive to believe the worst of you and the best of the reporter. I called my attending surgeon, the one I'd supposedly been trading sexual favors with. His name was Dr. Robert Harlow, and he was 61 years old, married with 3 kids, and one of the finest surgeons I'd ever worked with. He was a legitimate mentor to me, in addition to whatever my accuser was claiming. Dr. Harlow, I need to tell you something. I explained the situation, my voice steady even though I was falling apart inside. He was silent for a long moment. Faye, I can't talk to you about this. My lawyer is advising me to have no contact with you until the investigation is complete. But you can vouch for... I can't, I'm sorry, I really am. But if I say anything it can be construed as collusion or influence. You need to understand that. I understood that he was protecting himself, but I also understood that without him, I had nothing, just case logs and performance reviews and my word against whoever was destroying me. I called David. Someone at the hospital is accusing me of sleeping with an attending for case assignments, I said. My voice cracked on the last word. Oh my God, David said, that's a lie, that's insane. Did you? I couldn't finish the sentence. No, Faye, I would never, you know I would never. We have to tell them, I said. We have to tell them about us so they know that I'm not. No, David said immediately. Absolutely not. Faye, if we come forward they'll say we corroborated each other's stories. It'll look like we're lying. He was right, and I hated that he was right. What do we do? I asked. Let the investigation happen, prove you did nothing wrong, let the truth come out. But the truth wasn't coming out. The truth was being buried under a narrative that I couldn't control. My graduation was 5 weeks away when my mother called. Your father and I were looking at flights, she said, and I noticed that the residency program's graduation webpage says you're on administrative leave. Is everything okay? I sat on the edge of my bed in my apartment in Oakland, and I made a choice. I told her the truth. I've been accused of something, I said, by another resident. It's not true and I'm going to prove it, but I'm on administrative leave while they investigate. Silence. What were you accused of? My mother asked. I told her, condensed it, removed the most humiliating details, but essentially told her. Faye, she said my name like it was an accusation in itself. Is this about a man? There's a man I care about, yes, but... Are you having a sexual relationship with a supervisor? No, not with a supervisor, and it's more complicated than... It's yes or no, Faye. It's no with a supervisor, I said. There's someone in my program and we've been together, and someone found out and they're weaponizing it. What were you thinking? My mother interrupted. You're a doctor, you have a professional reputation, and you're behaving like a child. I felt something crack inside my chest. Mom, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm being accused of something false. Are you in a relationship during your residency? Yes. Then you did something wrong. You compromised your judgment and your reputation for a man. That's exactly what happens when women get involved with men they work with. It's a distraction. It's dangerous. That's not, I stopped. I was trying to defend myself, but I could hear in her voice that she'd already made up her mind. I didn't sleep with an attending. That part is false. I need to talk to your father, she said. He's going to be very disappointed. She hung up. I sat there, phone in my hand, and I realized something with absolute clarity. My mother didn't believe me. Not because the evidence was against me, but because I had given her a reason to believe I was capable of something like this. I had been in a relationship in my program. I had kept it secret. I had, in her framework, done something wrong, and when something wrong enough happened, the truth became negotiable. My father called 3 hours later. I need you to explain this, he said. I explained it again, the false allegation, the investigation, the timeline, my innocence. Why would someone accuse you if it wasn't true? He asked. Because they want to damage me, because they're competitive, because I don't know but I didn't do it. Are you in a relationship with someone at the hospital? Yes, but... Then you put yourself in a position where you could be accused of this. That's not the same as actually doing it. It's close enough, he said. Faye, you've worked too hard to throw it away on some guy. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm going to prove I'm innocent. How are you going to do that? I couldn't answer because I didn't know. After that call, I spent the next 4 weeks making 14 phone calls to my parents. Each one was me providing them with more information, more evidence, more explanation. Each one ended with them expressing varying degrees of disappointment and suspicion. The investigation concluded 4 days before my graduation. The hospital concluded that there was insufficient evidence to prove the allegations, but also insufficient evidence to completely exonerate me. They were going to allow me to graduate and complete my fellowship, but there would be a notation in my file, a question mark next to my name forever. The reporting party had remained anonymous. I never found out who accused me, though I spent months cycling through suspicions. I found out later, much later, that it was Riley. She had made an anonymous call to the hospital's ethics hotline on the advice of our family's lawyer, not because she believed the allegations, but because she wanted me stopped. My residency graduation was scheduled for May 15th. My family had booked flights. My mother had already purchased a new dress. My father had taken time off work, which almost never happened. But 4 days before the graduation, my mother called. Your father and I have decided not to come. What, why? Because we need to protect the family's reputation. Having our daughter graduate under the shadow of these allegations is a risk we're not willing to take. There's no shadow, I'm exonerated. You're noted as under investigation in your file, she said. That's not exoneration. The hospital said there's insufficient evidence, which means they can't prove you guilty and they can't prove you're innocent. That ambiguity is the problem. People will see that notation and they'll wonder. We can't be associated with that kind of uncertainty. I heard her clearly, loud and clear. What she was saying was, your reputation matters less than ours. Your graduation matters less than the image we project. You matter less than protecting ourselves. So you're not coming, I said. No, I'm sorry, but we're not. I should have cried, I should have argued. Instead, I felt something seismic shift inside me. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. I stood there and I watched my relationship with my mother become something different, something survivable, but only if I stopped expecting anything from her. Okay, I said, I understand. We do hope you'll do well in your fellowship, she added, as if that was a consolation, as if offering hope for my future after abandoning my present meant something. I called my father, thinking that maybe, just maybe, he would do the right thing. Your mother and I discussed it, he said. We're on the same page about this. Same page, I hated that phrase. It made it sound mutual, like we'd all gathered around a table and decided this together, like they hadn't just made a choice to leave me. I'm your daughter, I said. I don't know why I said it. It wasn't an argument. It was just a fact I thought he should remember. I know that, Faye, but we have a responsibility to the family name. I'm sorry. I graduated 5 days later, with no one from my family in attendance. I wore my white coat to the ceremony, and I walked across the stage, and I shook hands with the dean, and I smiled for the photographer. And I did it all with a completely clear understanding that I was alone, that the people who had raised me had chosen their own reputation over my graduation, that blood was conditional on behavior. My attending surgeons were there. David stood in the audience. My mentors, the people who believed in me, came to watch me cross that stage, but my family was not among them. After the ceremony, I went back to my apartment, and I took off my white coat and I lay on my bed, and I did not cry. I had learned by then that crying was a luxury I couldn't afford. Instead, I called my parents. I'm not going to bother asking you how you are, I said. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing instead. I'm moving on. I'm going to build a life without you. I don't know if there's a path back from this, but I know that there's no path forward while I'm still waiting for you to see me, so I'm not waiting anymore. My father said, Faye, that's not fair. You skipped my graduation, I said. To protect your reputation, that's not fair. We were trying to protect you, my mother said. You were not, I said calmly. You were trying to protect yourselves. You were trying to protect the image of your family. And I was an inconvenience to that image, so you left. I understand the logic. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. I hung up. I didn't answer when they called back. I didn't read the emails my father sent. I blocked my mother's number after the 7th voicemail. And I moved into a new chapter of my life, alone. The trauma surgery fellowship at UCSF was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've run resuscitations on people who were bleeding out on the floor. The fellowship is 12 hours of surgery plus 12 hours of being awake. You work 6 days a week for 3 years. By the end of it, you're not the same person you were when you started. I was okay with that. I needed to be someone different. The hospital became my family, not in a sentimental way, but in a functional way. The other fellows became my crew. We worked together, survived together, celebrated together. Dr. Patricia Liu, the fellowship director, became a mentor to me in the way my father had never been. She noticed me. She knew my capabilities. She pushed me toward excellence not because she expected it of me, but because she saw it in me and wanted to see what I could do with it. You're a natural in trauma, she told me during my 2nd year. You don't freeze. Most people freeze when they first experience severe trauma. You see a problem and you solve it. It's unusual. I'd never thought of it that way. I'd just been doing my job. But I realized in that moment that I'd built a skill set that mattered, that I could save lives in a way that other people couldn't. And it wasn't contingent on my family's approval. It wasn't dependent on anyone's belief in me. It was just something I could do. David and I broke up during my 1st year of fellowship. It wasn't because we didn't love each other. We did. We talked every night on the phone, those late-night conversations in the small hours of the morning when we were both exhausted and honest. But long distance was brutal in a way we hadn't anticipated. He was building a career at Johns Hopkins. I was building a career at UCSF, and both careers were demanding everything. I think we need to end this, he said, and I knew he was right before he even said the words. I know, I said. If things were different. They're not different, this is where we are. We cried on the phone, we said goodbye, and I realized that I had just lost the last remaining person who might have stood up for me during the allegation. But that was okay. I was learning that I didn't need anyone to stand up for me. I could stand up for myself. I focused entirely on surgery. I researched trauma outcomes. I published papers. I presented at conferences. I became the person that other surgeons called when they had a difficult case. I became the person that trauma patients wanted operating on them. By the time I was in my 3rd year of fellowship, I was being recruited for faculty positions. UCSF wanted to keep me. Johns Hopkins called. Mayo Clinic called. I had options, real options, the kind of options that people earn, not that people are given. I chose to stay at UCSF. Dr. Liu offered me a position as an attending surgeon in the Department of Trauma Surgery. I would have the chance to train the next generation of residents. I would run my own research initiatives. I would be a leader. I was 34 years old. I had built a life that had nothing to do with my family, a life that was entirely mine. I didn't think about my family very much during those 4 years after graduation. This is probably a lie. I thought about them constantly. Every achievement, there was a small voice in my head that said, if they were here, they would be proud. Every article I published, every patient I saved, every room I walked into where people deferred to my expertise, there was a moment where I imagined my father's face changing, finally seeing me as someone worth seeing. But I didn't reach out, not once. My mother tried occasionally. A birthday card that I didn't respond to, a Mother's Day email that I deleted without reading. She was trying to maintain a relationship with someone who had decided she was no longer available. Marcus called once in year 2 of fellowship. We talked for 15 minutes about nothing. He didn't apologize for not defending me. He didn't ask what had happened or express skepticism about the allegations. He just wanted to maintain the appearance of family connection without actually connecting. I found that more painful than the abandonment somehow. Riley, I didn't hear from Riley, not directly, but I heard that she'd gotten engaged, that she was getting married, that she was happy. I was genuinely glad for her, which might sound contradictory given everything, but it wasn't. I had compartmentalized her into the category of people who hurt me but whose happiness I don't begrudge. My father never reached out at all. I had a theory about why. He didn't know how to talk to someone who had disappointed him and then refused to show up for redemption. He was a man who worked from a playbook of success and failure, achievement and shortcoming, and I had committed the sin of failing while also moving forward. I had refused to sit in the failure and beg for forgiveness. I had just gotten up and built a different life. To him, that might have looked like refusal, like defiance. I was okay with that interpretation. I dated casually. Not seriously, not the way I'd been with David, but enough to feel like a person. There was an orthopedic surgeon named James who I saw for 8 months. We had good sex and bad conversations, and it ended because I didn't feel anything when he left. There was a lawyer named Michelle who I dated for 3 months until she asked me to come home for Christmas, and I realized I'd never told her that I didn't have a family to come home to. I broke up with her the same night. I had friendships, real ones. Dr. Liu and I became close. There was another trauma surgeon, Dr. Marcus White, who became my closest friend and occasional conference companion. I had people who knew me and cared about me. They weren't my family, but they were family in the way that mattered. They showed up. Every single year on my graduation day, I did something for myself. I took the day off from surgery. I made myself a fancy dinner. Sometimes I cried about how empty that celebration was. Mostly I just reminded myself that I had earned this. No one had given it to me. No one could take it away. And then on a Tuesday in March of year 4, everything changed. I was in the middle of an aortic repair when my phone vibrated on the table outside the operating room. I was the lead surgeon, so I didn't answer it, but I saw the nurse frown and check it, and I knew it was something. The aortic repair took 4 hours. When I was done, the patient stable, the surgery a technical success, the nurse handed me my phone. 8 missed calls from an unknown Portland number, 2 voicemails, both from a hospital ID. I called the number back with a sense of dread in my stomach. Oregon Health and Science University, Emergency Department, a woman's voice said, "This is Dr. Marseille. I was just called from this number." "Hold on, let me find who called you." I waited, still in my surgical scrubs, my hands still stinging from the pre-surgical wash. A different voice came on. "Dr. Marseille, this is Dr. Patricia Goldman from OHSU. You were listed as an emergency contact for Riley Marseille." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" I asked. "Your sister was brought to our facility at approximately 2 p.m. today with severe abdominal trauma. She was hit by a car while crossing the street. She's currently in critical condition in the ICU. We're preparing her for emergency surgery." I couldn't breathe. "Is she alive?" I asked. "Yes, but she's unstable. Dr. Marseille, we were hoping that given your surgical background, you might be able to get to Portland quickly. Your family is asking for family history and medical information, and we thought it would be helpful to speak with you directly." Riley was my sister. We hadn't spoken in 4 years. She was the person who had destroyed me, I was pretty sure, though I'd never proven it. And she was dying, possibly, and I was the only person who might be able to help. "I'm leaving right now," I said. "What hospital are you at?" She gave me the address. I already knew it. It was 10 minutes from my parents' house. I made arrangements for another attending to finish my post-op work. I left my apartment within 30 minutes. I booked a flight that left in 4 hours. I was in Portland by midnight. OHSU Hospital in Portland is a level 1 trauma center. My family would be there. In a waiting room, probably, drinking bad coffee and refreshing their phones and asking questions that doctors couldn't answer. I took a breath before I walked into the ICU. Riley was unconscious, intubated with bandages around her abdomen and chest. The monitors told me what I needed to know. She was stable, but barely. She had internal injuries that were significant. She had been very close to death. I stood at the window of her room for a long moment, and I felt something shift in my chest. This was my sister. This was the person who had made the anonymous call that ruined me. And also, this was my sister, who was 8 years old when I was born, who had held my hand at the doctor's office, who had taught me how to ride a bike. The past and present crashed into each other. "Faith." I turned. My mother was standing in the hallway, her face blank with shock. She was older than I remembered. Her hair had more grey. She had lines around her eyes. "Hi," I said. She started toward me, and then she stopped, like she wasn't sure what to do. "You came," she said. "You called," I said. "I came." "I didn't, the hospital called." "I know." My father appeared in the hallway. He saw me, and the recognition on his face was like watching someone understand something that had been too big to hold. He saw me the way he'd seen me once before when I'd matched into trauma surgery, like I was someone who had accomplished something real. "Faye," he said, "that was all just my name." "What happened?" I asked. "She was hit by a car," my mother said. "The driver didn't see her. She was crossing the street near her apartment. The driver stopped, thank God. They called 911. She was in surgery for 6 hours." "Who was the surgeon?" I asked, already mentally assessing. "Aortic repair, vascular injury, abdominal hemorrhage, critical condition." "Dr. Alan Rothstein, do you know him?" I didn't, but I would look him up later. I would review Riley's records with his permission. I would make sure he'd done everything right. "Let me talk to him," I said. My father looked at me with something like gratitude. "He's in his office, I can show you." We walked through the hospital together, my father and me, for the first time in 4 years. We didn't talk. There was nothing to say. The past existed between us, too big to navigate, but there was an immediate present that superseded it. My sister needed help. I could provide it. That's what mattered. Dr. Rothstein was 60-something, with grey hair and the exhausted competence of someone who had spent the day fighting to keep someone alive. He looked up when we entered. "You're the family," he said. "I'm the patient's sister," I said. "I'm Dr. Faye Marseille. I'm a trauma surgeon at UCSF. I'd like to review your operative notes if possible." Something shifted in his face. Recognition, maybe, or relief. He'd done good work, and another surgeon would verify that. "Of course," he said. "Come here." He pulled up the images on his computer. He walked me through the surgery in the language that surgeons use with each other, precise, technical, without emotion. The damage had been severe. He'd done everything right. The repair was solid. The prognosis was cautious but not hopeless. "You did good work," I told him. "I had help," he said. "She has a good surgical team, and she's young, that helps." We walked back to Riley's room. My mother and father were waiting outside. "She's going to need a lot of care," I said. "Close monitoring. The next 48 hours are critical, but Dr. Rothstein did excellent work. She's got a chance." My mother's face crumpled. She reached out like she might touch me, and then she didn't. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Where else would I be?" I said. And I meant it. Whatever had happened between us, she was my sister, and I was the person who could maybe help her, and that was enough. I stayed at my parents' house for the first time in 4 years. Not in my childhood bedroom, that felt too complicated, but in the guest room, the one where they put up visiting relatives. My mother had prepared it carefully. Fresh sheets, flowers on the nightstand, a little welcome gesture that was heartbreaking in its sweetness, because it acknowledged that I had become, in some sense, a guest in the home where I'd grown up. We didn't talk about the allegation. We didn't talk about the graduation. We didn't talk about any of the years that had passed. Instead, we talked about Riley's medical care, about what her recovery might look like, about the logistics of her rehabilitation. My father would ask me clinical questions, and I would answer them with the clarity I'd learned in fellowship. He would listen with actual attention, the way he'd always listened to people he respected, and I realized slowly that he'd been showing up like this my entire life. He'd just never shown up for me. He'd shown up for people he thought mattered. On the second day, I went to my parents' house to sleep, and I couldn't. I was used to being on call, used to existing in a state of controlled chaos. Sitting in a quiet house, waiting for bad news, was almost worse. I went downstairs at 3 a.m. and found my mother in the kitchen making tea. She didn't look surprised to see me. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Medical school never," I said. "It's always 3 a.m. in my body." She made me tea without asking what kind I wanted. And I realized she still knew that I liked honey but no milk. I sat at the kitchen table where I'd sat countless times as a child, where I'd done homework and eaten breakfast and tried to be invisible. "I'm sorry," my mother said suddenly. I didn't respond. "I'm sorry we didn't come to your graduation," she continued. "And I'm sorry we didn't believe you, and I'm sorry that we let something temporary become permanent." I listened to her apologize, and I felt nothing. No relief, no acceptance, just a profound flatness. She was apologizing because Riley was dying and she was scared, and I was someone with expertise. She wasn't apologizing because she'd been wrong. She was apologizing because she needed something from me. Thank you, I said. That's not very gracious, my mother said. I'm not feeling very gracious, I said. I'm here because Riley needs me, not because I forgive you. She nodded and I watched her absorb that. I watched her understand that forgiveness was not a given, that I had the power in this moment, and that power meant I could choose not to give her what she wanted. Okay, she said, I understand. But I don't think she did. On the third day, Riley woke up. The awakening was gradual. First, a response to stimulation, then opening of eyes, then the kind of confused awareness that means consciousness is returning. I was there when it happened, standing beside her bed, and I watched her eyes move behind her eyelids like she was dreaming. She didn't recognize me at first, that was the drugs. But then, after a few minutes, something in her face shifted. Recognition, confusion, the dawning realization that she was awake and alive and had to figure out what had happened. I pressed the call button. Welcome back, I said. She tried to speak, but she was intubated. She made a sound, desperate and terrified. You're okay, I said. You're in the hospital, you were hit by a car, you're going to be fine. The nurses came, and I stepped back, giving them space to work. I watched Riley try to pull out her breathing tube and watched the nurses gently restrain her. Dr. Marseille, one of them said to me, recognizing the title, Are you family? I'm her sister, I said. Something in Riley's eyes shifted. She was looking at me like she was trying to figure out if I was real. I left the room to give the nurses space and found my parents in the waiting room, both of them standing, like they'd been waiting for permission to approach. She's awake, I said. My mother made a sound, my father closed his eyes. Relief, finally a moment where the outcome was not unknown. She's asking for you, I said to my mother, though I had no idea if that was true. But my mother needed permission to go see her daughter, and I had the power to grant it. Riley was extubated the next day. After that, the infection risk decreased, and the expectation that she would recover became something more than hope, it became certainty. I was getting ready to fly back to San Francisco. My parents took me to the airport. My father drove. My mother sat in the passenger seat. I sat in the back watching Portland slide past the windows, the city where I'd been born, where I'd been invisible, where I'd learned to believe that I didn't matter. When are you coming back? My mother asked. I don't know, I said. I have surgery scheduled at UCSF, but I can probably come back in 2 weeks for a few days. Riley is going to want to thank you, my mother said. She's going to need physical therapy, I said. The abdominal muscle damage is significant. Her recovery is going to take months. Make sure she has a good PT team. She has you, my mother said. No, I said. She doesn't, I'm a trauma surgeon. That's not the same as a physical therapist, and it's not the same as actual support. I came here because she was critical. That doesn't mean I'm staying. That doesn't mean anything has changed. My father drove in silence. What would it take? My mother asked. What would it take for things to change? I thought about this question for the first time, really thought about it. Honesty, I said. About what happened. About why you didn't come to my graduation. About why you didn't believe me. About why you chose to protect yourselves instead of protecting me. I would need you to understand what you did and to acknowledge it, not to apologize for it, but to actually understand it. And then I would need to believe that you understood it, which would take years of consistent behavior that backs up your understanding. That's, my mother started. That's the price of reconciliation, I said. If you're not willing to pay it, then we can maintain a functional relationship where I help Riley and we're cordial at family events. But I'm not going to pretend that the last 4 years didn't happen. I'm not going to pretend that you didn't fail me. I'm not going to make this easy for you. My father stopped the car at the airport drop-off and turned around to look at me. I should have been there, he said. I stared at him. I should have come to your graduation, he continued. I should have believed you. I should have stood up for my daughter instead of protecting my image. I was a coward. I don't think I'd ever heard my father call himself a coward before. Okay, I said. That's not an apology, he said. That's a statement of fact. I was a coward and I'm sorry for it. Thank you, I said. Is that enough? He asked. No, I said, but it's a start. I got out of the car and got my luggage from the trunk, and I stood at the curb watching my parents' car disappear back into Portland traffic. And I didn't know if I would ever forgive them, but I knew that something had shifted. The past was no longer an inactive wound, it was actively processing, and that was different. I was back at UCSF for 1 week. I was in the middle of a routine cholecystectomy when my phone rang in the surgeon's lounge. I didn't answer, I was operating. But when I finished and I checked my phone, there was a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. Dr. Marseille, this is Dr. Alan Rothstein from OHSU. I need to speak with you about something related to your sister's case. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. I called him back immediately. I've been reviewing the hospital records related to Riley's case, he said, and I've come across something that I think you should be aware of. There's a notation in her file about an anonymous allegation that was made against her 6 years ago. I felt my blood go cold. What kind of allegation? I asked. Sexual harassment against another employee. The allegation was investigated, found to be unsubstantiated and sealed, but it raised some questions for me, particularly given the context of your own case. My own case, he knew about it. Of course he knew about it. He'd probably looked me up after meeting me the way surgeons do. I'm listening, I said. I did some research, Dr. Rothstein said. I looked up your residency graduation and I found the news coverage of it. I read about the allegations that were made against you. And then I started thinking, what if the same person made both allegations? Riley wouldn't, I started, and then I stopped. Actually, Riley would. Riley had motive, and opportunity, and a pattern of behavior that suggested she might be capable of this. I don't have proof, Dr. Rothstein continued, but I have timing, and I have pattern, and I have some documentation that suggests Riley may have made a complaint against a colleague who turned her down for a date. If that's the case, and if the same person made the allegation against you, then the allegations against me might not be real, I said. It's possible, he said. I sat down on the edge of the break room table, and I felt something inside me reorganize. For 6 years, I'd carried the possibility that the allegation against me was real, that maybe I had done something wrong, that maybe I'd been lucky to escape consequences, that maybe the only reason I'd been exonerated was because the hospital couldn't prove what I'd done. But if the allegation was false, if Riley had made it up, then it wasn't about me at all. It was about her. It was about her using a weapon that she knew would hurt me. Thank you for telling me, I said. I thought you should know, Dr. Rothstein said. For what it's worth, your sister's case made me think about her character. She tried to deny the allegation against her. She said the person she'd complained about was lying, but there was evidence that suggested otherwise. I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because I think you should understand who you're helping. After I hung up, I sat in the break room for a long time. I called my mentor, Dr. Liu. I need to talk to you about something that happened a long time ago, I said. She closed her office door, and I told her the entire story. From the allegation to the graduation, to the silence, to Riley's accident, to the conversation with Dr. Rothstein. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know, I said. Do you want to confront Riley? I don't know, I said again. She almost died. I don't know if it's cruel to tell her that I know what she did. That's your call, Dr. Liu said. But I'll tell you what I think. You spent 6 years believing a lie about yourself because of her. She spent 6 years knowing she'd lied about you. One of you was suffering in ignorance. The other was suffering in complicity. I think she owes you honesty. The investigation, finding the truth that confirms your suspicion. I didn't confront Riley immediately. Instead, I did what I do best. I gathered evidence. I requested copies of my residency records from UCSF. I requested the hospital's investigation file. I requested records of all anonymous complaints made during my time in the program, and I hired a private investigator. His name was James Crawford, and he was a former FBI agent who now worked in medical fraud cases. I met him in his office in Oakland, and I told him I needed him to find out if my sister had made an anonymous complaint against me 6 years ago. Why do you think she did? He asked. Because she made a similar complaint against someone else at around the same time, I said. The hospital sealed both cases, but I have a reason to believe they're related. He nodded like this was the kind of thing people did, made false allegations, destroyed reputations, and then moved on with their lives. I'll look into it, he said. But I need to be clear. The hospital isn't going to hand over anonymous complaint information without a court order, and if you want a court order, you're going to have to file a lawsuit. For what? I asked. Defamation. For defamation, yes, or tortious interference, or false accusation. There are options. I thought about filing a lawsuit against my sister while she was in physical therapy for injuries sustained in a car accident. The optics were terrible. The emotional toll would be significant, and the possibility of actually winning was uncertain. Anonymous complaints were, by design, hard to prove. But the possibility of knowing the truth was very attractive. Let me think about it, I said. I thought about it for 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, I called Riley. She was home from the hospital, home from inpatient physical therapy, and starting outpatient care. I could hear exhaustion in her voice when she picked up the phone. Hi, I said. Hi, she said. There was confusion in her voice. We didn't call each other. I wanted to check on your recovery, I said. It's going okay, she said. Physical therapy is brutal, but Dr. Rothstein says I'm healing faster than expected. That's good, I said. There was a pause. Thank you again for coming, she said. I know we hadn't been close for a while and you didn't have to. Actually, I need to ask you something, I said, interrupting her. Okay, she said carefully. Did you make the allegation against me? I asked. Silence. Did you call the hospital's ethics hotline and tell them that I was sleeping with an attending surgeon in exchange for case assignments? Maury, silence. Riley, I said, I'm asking you directly. Yes, she said finally. The admission was so simple, so uncomplicated, that it almost felt anticlimactic. Why? I asked. Because you were leaving us, she said. You were getting all of this attention and recognition and achievement, and we were staying the same, and you were doing it because of some guy, and I. She stopped. You what? I asked. I wanted to stop you, she said. I wanted you to fail. I wanted you to need us again. I wanted you to understand what it felt like to not be special, to not be the one everyone was proud of. I had to sit down. Do you understand what you did? I asked. Yes, she said. I ruined your reputation. I made you paranoid. I made your family abandon you. And you built a whole career without any of us, and you're this amazing surgeon, and I'm still angry about it. You tried to destroy me, I said. I did, she said, and it didn't work, and now I'm jealous of you in a way that I don't know how to get past. I couldn't respond. I just sat there holding the phone, listening to my sister admit that she had deliberately, consciously, with premeditation, tried to hurt me in one of the most effective ways possible. I'm sorry, she said. I know that's not enough. I know that nothing I say can undo what I did. But I am sorry. I've been sorry for 6 years. I've been waiting for you to come back so I could tell you. You made it hard to come back, I said. I know, she said, I know. You could have just told me you were jealous, I said. I didn't know how, she said. I didn't know how to say I'm jealous of you to someone who had worked so hard, so I just buried it and I turned it into this thing and I hurt you, and I've spent 6 years living with that. I got off the phone shortly after that. I told her I needed to think about everything she'd said. She said she understood. I sat in my apartment for a long time after, and I tried to figure out how I felt. Relief, maybe. Finally knowing the truth was better than living with the ambiguity. Anger, definitely. The anger was palpable and hot. But also, and this surprised me, something that looked like forgiveness. Not forgiveness of her actions, but forgiveness of her humanity. She had been jealous and insecure and desperate, and she had made a terrible choice. But she was also my sister, and she had been courageous enough to admit what she'd done. I told my parents the next day. I called them and I said, Riley made the allegation. She called the hospital and told them I was sleeping with an attending surgeon. There was silence on the other end. How do you know? My father asked. She told me, I said. I confronted her and she admitted it. Why would she do that? My mother asked, as if the question had a logical answer. Because she was jealous, I said. Because I was getting recognition and she wasn't. Because she wanted me to fail so that I would need the family again. I heard my mother make a sound like something breaking. She destroyed you, my mother said. She destroyed your relationship with us. She made us not believe in you. And I forgave her for it, I said. That was a lie, partially. I hadn't forgiven Riley, but I was on the path to forgiveness, and the path was important. How can you forgive her? My mother asked. Because holding on to it hurt me more than it hurt her, I said. And because I'm choosing to. And because she was also hurt. She felt invisible the same way I did. And instead of dealing with it directly, she hurt me. But she admitted it, and she expressed remorse, and she's living with the consequences of what she did. What about us? My father asked. What about you? I said. Don't you need us to express remorse? Yes, I said. Eventually, but first I need you to understand what you did. You chose to believe the worst of me without evidence. You chose to protect your reputation over supporting me. You didn't ask if I was okay. You didn't stand by me, and that choice had real consequences. I lost my family. I lost the support structure I needed to get through the hardest time of my life, and I had to rebuild myself entirely without you. I know, my father said. Do you? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, you're just sorry that you were wrong. You're not sorry that you doubted me. You're not sorry that you didn't believe in me. You're sorry that the story you believed turned out to be false. That's not the same thing. What do you want us to do? My mother asked. I want you to think about what I just said, I said. I want you to sit with it for a while. I want you to understand that your love for me was conditional on my behavior, and I want you to decide if you want to change that. Not for me, for you. I hung up. And then I cried for the first time in 6 years, not because I was heartbroken, but because I was finally allowing myself to feel how heartbroken I had been. My parents called me 2 days later. We've been thinking, my father said, about everything you said, and we realized that we hurt you, that we failed you when you needed us most, and we understand that you might not forgive us, but we would like to try to rebuild some kind of relationship with you, if that's something you'd be willing to do. What does that look like? I asked. I don't know, my father said. What would it look like to you? I had actually thought about this. I'd thought about what conditions I needed in order to move forward. I need you to go to therapy, I said. Both of you. And I need you to actually do the work, not just go through the motions. I need you to understand what made you choose reputation over your daughter. I need you to understand the patterns in your family that made you value achievement over presence. And I need you to change those patterns, or at least acknowledge them and work on them. If you're willing to do that, then I'm willing to try. Okay, my father said, we'll do that. He said it like it was easy, and maybe for him it was. Maybe he was just relieved that there was something he could do to fix this, but I took him at his word. Over the next year, I watched my family try. My parents found a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. They went every Tuesday at 3 p.m. My mother told me about it the first time like she wanted credit for showing up. I didn't give her credit. I just acknowledged it and moved on. Riley and I started talking regularly, not about the allegation but about everything else, about her recovery, about her job, about the fact that we were both lonely in different ways. She was still living in Portland, still seeing therapists, still working on understanding why she'd done what she'd done, and I was watching her do that work, and I found myself respecting her for it. My father sent me a book about family trauma. He'd marked passages with a pen. In the margins, he'd written notes to me, explaining why he thought the passages were relevant. It was the most honest communication we'd ever had, not because the passages were particularly insightful, but because he was trying so hard to understand. My mother apologized to me during a phone call, but not the way I expected. I realized, she said, that I wasn't angry at you for the allegation. I was angry at you for putting yourself in a position where you could be accused of something. And that's not fair, that's victim blaming, that's me putting my own fear above your reality, and I'm sorry for that. I wasn't sure if that was enough, but it was honest. It was the kind of apology that came from actual reflection, not just the desire to fix the situation. Slowly, over months, something began to rebuild. It wasn't the same as what it had been before. That family was gone. That dynamic, where I was invisible and Riley was beloved and my parents were distant and my brother was golden, that was over. But something new was building in its place, something that had more space, more honesty, more acknowledgement of pain. 18 months after Riley's accident, I flew back to Portland for a weekend. My parents picked me up at the airport. We drove to their house. And we sat around the dinner table, all of us, my parents, Riley and me. Marcus was in San Francisco on business, but we tried to time it so that he could be there too. It was awkward at first. We didn't know how to talk to each other in this new configuration. But then, slowly, conversation started to flow. My father asked me about a research project I was working on. My mother told me about renovations they were planning to the house. She'd finally admitted that she loved that house less than she loved control over it, and she was trying to make peace with that. Riley and I traded stories about work. We laughed at something stupid, and for a moment it felt like we were just sisters again. Not perfect sisters, not sisters who hadn't hurt each other, but sisters who had decided that hurt was less important than connection. "I have something for you," Riley said to me after dinner. She went to her bedroom and came back with a box. "I've been collecting these," she said, handing it to me. Inside were copies of every article I'd published, every achievement, every moment that had been chronicled in medical journals or news coverage or professional announcements. She'd been keeping track of me. "I wanted you to know," she said, "that even when I wasn't talking to you, I was still proud of you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." I looked at my sister, this person who had tried to destroy me, and who was now trying so hard to rebuild what she'd broken. "Thank you," I said. "It's been 2 years since Riley's accident. I see my family regularly now. Not constantly, not in the way that families who live near each other see each other, but I come to Portland every 3 months or so. We have dinner. We talk. We're rebuilding something real, something that doesn't require me to be invisible and doesn't require them to be perfect. My father and I have actual conversations now. He asks me real questions about my work and my life, and I answer him. Sometimes I still feel angry at him for the graduation, for the doubt, but mostly I feel grateful that he's trying. My mother has been the hardest to forgive, but that's because she represents something for me. She represents the impossible standard of maternal love that I've spent my whole life trying to earn. And understanding that about her has made it easier to just see her as a person who did her best with the emotional tools she had. Riley and I are close in a new way. We're not the sisters who share everything. We're the sisters who share a history of hurt and have decided to move past it anyway. It's honest, and that's better than false intimacy. The allegation still exists in my medical record. I looked into trying to get it removed, but the process is complicated and expensive and requires proving that it was false. Dr. Rothstein was willing to testify, but I decided not to pursue it. Sometimes I think the scar is more important than the erasure. It reminds me who I was and what I survived. My career has continued to flourish. I was made a full professor at UCSF. I run my own research program. I train residents and fellows who are better than I was at their stage, and I try to see them the way I wanted to be seen, as people with potential and value and human complexity, not just as competent surgeons. And I'm dating again, seriously. His name is Dr. James Chen, and he's a neurologist at the hospital. He's kind in a way that David wasn't, and he's present in a way that I was afraid to ask for a long time. When I told him my story, the whole thing from the beginning, he didn't try to fix it or minimize it. He just held my hand and said, "That took courage." And I realized that I had been waiting for someone to tell me that everything I'd done, building my career alone, surviving the abandonment, choosing not to be destroyed by a lie, all of it had been courageous. And I deserved to have that acknowledged. My name is Faye Marseille, and I am finally enough. Not because my family sees me, not because my achievements are finally recognized, but because I know that I am enough. I built a life from rubble. I created something real from destruction, and that something real is more valuable than any family approval could ever be. If you're waiting for your family to see you, stop waiting. See yourself first. Believe in yourself before anyone else does. Build something real, something that's yours, something that no one can take away from you by doubting you or accusing you or simply choosing not to look. The truth doesn't expire. It doesn't matter if it takes 5 days or 5 years or a car accident to emerge. Truth has its own timeline, and sometimes the hardest part isn't discovering it. It's deciding what to do with it once you know. My family and I will never be what we were, but we're becoming something new, something honest, something real. And that's actually better than going back, because going back means pretending that the hurt didn't happen, and I spent too many years being invisible to be willing to do that. I see myself now, and it's enough.